Have you ever looked at your credit card statement and felt that strange mix of relief and dread? Relief because the minimum payment is so small, dread because the balance never seems to shrink, and wondered if maybe this is just how it works for everyone. If maybe you're overthinking something that millions of people do without question. What if the thing you've been told helps your credit score is actually designed to keep you broke? And what if the reason it feels so normal is because normalcy is exactly what makes the trap invisible? You've heard people say you need to carry a balance to build credit, or that keeping a little debt shows you can manage responsibility, or that paying interest is just the cost of flexibility. But have you ever stopped to ask who benefits when you believe those things? Or why the advice that keeps you comfortable is the same advice that keeps you paying? Why does everyone around you seem comfortable with balances, yet nobody talks about where that comfort actually leads? Not next month, not next year, but 5 years from now, when you realize you've paid for the same purchase 3 times over, and the only thing that grew was the weight of something you can't see. Could the advice you got from someone you trust be the exact reason you can't get ahead? Not because they wanted to hurt you, but because they were caught in the same cycle and mistook survival for strategy. There are 3 reasons you should never carry a credit card balance in the US, and none of them are what you've been told. The first reason is compound interest, but not the way you think, not as a number on a page, but as a time thief that turns temporary purchases into permanent payments. Imagine you put $2,500 on your credit card for something you needed: car repairs, medical bills, holiday gifts, whatever convinced you it was necessary. And your card has a 22% APR, which is pretty standard in the US. If you pay the minimum each month, around $75, that $2,500 doesn't disappear in a year or even 2. It takes over 6 years to pay off. And by the time it's gone, you've paid nearly $4,400 total, which means you paid $1,900 in interest alone for something that probably stopped mattering years ago. What if every swipe you make today is actually a decision about what you'll still be paying for in 2031? The interest compounds daily, which means every single morning you wake up, you owe more than you did the night before, even if you didn't spend a cent. And that's not a mistake or a penalty. That's the design, the invisible architecture that turns your comfort into their profit. You look at that $75 minimum payment and it feels manageable, almost generous. But what they don't show you on the statement is that only $29 of that goes toward what you actually borrowed. The rest is pure interest, which means you're running on a treadmill that moves backward. And the psychological trick is that it works because you genuinely believe you're being responsible by making payments on time, never realizing that on time and effective are completely different things. The second reason is the credit score myth. And this one cuts deeper because it's the lie you've been telling yourself to justify the balance. You've heard it 100 times. Carrying a balance builds credit. Lenders want to see you managing debt. Zero balance means zero history. But here's what actually happens when credit bureaus calculate your score. They don't reward you for paying interest. They measure utilization rate and payment history, which means the balance itself does absolutely nothing except cost you money. Let's say you have a $5,000 credit limit and you're carrying a $1,500 balance because you think it shows you're responsibly using credit. That's 30% utilization, which actually hurts your score if it stays there month after month. Whereas paying that balance down to 0 and using the card only for small purchases you pay off immediately keeps your utilization under 10% and costs you nothing in interest. What if the thing you thought was helping your credit score was actually dragging it down while bleeding you dry? A $0 balance paid in full every month builds the exact same payment history as a revolving balance, except one demonstrates control and costs nothing, while the other demonstrates dependence and costs you hundreds or thousands in interest. And the reason this myth persists isn't because it's complicated. It's because credit card companies profit when you believe confusion is the same as strategy. After the 2008 financial crisis, credit card debt in the US surged past $1 trillion, and millions of people were carrying balances they genuinely believed were strategic, responsible even, right up until everything tightened and they realized the myth had been engineered to feel like wisdom. The third reason is psychological normalization, and it's the most dangerous because it doesn't feel like danger. It feels like adulthood. Carrying a balance has become so normalized in American financial culture that not carrying one almost feels irresponsible, like you're not participating in the system correctly, like you're missing out on some invisible benefit everyone else understands. Picture this. You're out with friends, and someone mentions they paid off their credit card in full this month. And instead of sounding impressive, it almost sounds naive, like they don't understand how credit works, like they're not building their financial future the way everyone else is. But what if that reaction, that instinct to see debt-free as somehow less savvy, is exactly the conditioning the system needs to keep you trapped? The comfort you feel when you make that minimum payment, the sense that you're managing your debt responsibly, that you're in control. That's not control, that's operant conditioning, disguised as personal finance. And the system profits most when the trap feels like a choice. Why does everyone around you seem fine with revolving balances? Why does it feel like a rite of passage? Why does paying off your card in full every month feel almost excessive when it's literally just not giving away free money? Because credit card companies spent decades training entire generations to see debt not as a warning sign, but as a feature of modern life. And the psychological architecture is so seamless that questioning it feels like paranoia instead of awareness. Even people who built wealth, who seemed immune to financial mistakes, have looked back and said, the credit card trap was the one thing they didn't see coming. Not because they were reckless, but because the system profits most when smart people believe they're being strategic. So there they are. Compound interest that turns a $2,500 necessity into a $4,400 regret. The credit score myth that costs you money while doing nothing for your creditworthiness, and the psychological normalization that makes financial bleeding feel like financial maturity. And the strangest part is that knowing these three reasons doesn't make you feel empowered or motivated. It makes you feel watched, like you've just noticed a camera that's been recording you the whole time, and now you can't unsee it. You look at your wallet differently now. Not with fear, exactly, but with the unsettling awareness that the minimum payment you just made wasn't progress. It was the trap feeling most comfortable right before it tightens. How many other financial behaviors feel normal simply because you've never questioned who profits